Well, hey everyone, it's Nate. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Vinyl Guide. This week we are talking to world-renowned record collector and blues maniac John Tefteller, the man who owns some of the world's absolute rarest records. John is huge on pre-war blues 78s, which he covers thoroughly on today's show, as well as discussing the world of record and music collectibles, especially in light of the year 2020. John also talks about the demand for used and collectible records. He discusses one of the world's rarest Beatles vinyl collectibles, the Sgt. Pepper cover with the Capitol execs on the front. John also discusses other rarities, like the 5 Sharp Stormy Weather 78. He talks about his amazing blues images calendar, which you can pick up at bluesimages.com. John even shares knowledge of other Robert Johnson photographs that are in existence but not in circulation. Right now there are 3 photos of Robert Johnson that the public has seen, but apparently there are more, which John reveals in today's interview. And by the way, there's an extended version of today's interview available only to our patreon.com/Vinyl Guide community. Head over to patreon.com/Vinyl Guide, help support our show, and get access to all sorts of neato goodies like extended interviews, secret episodes, and more. Just a few bucks each month helps keep this show going, and we return the favor by providing you more interviews and extended content. Go there now, patreon.com/Vinyl Guide, and thanks in advance for your support. And also a huge shout out to show sponsor AudiofileUSA.com. Everyone knows AudiofileUSA.com has the cleanest used records, all excellent and near mint shape. But the coolest part of AudiofileUSA.com is digging through their inventory of nearly 50,000 used records. Go over to AudiofileUSA.com, search for your favorite artist, browse by genre, by record label. There's a ton of great deals in there. And guess what? AudiofileUSA.com ships straight to your front door no matter where you are in the world. That's AudiofileUSA.com. Search their inventory and find your holy grail. Also, I gotta say, well done to the team at Groove Washer for making the best record cleaner in heaven, earth, and the netherworlds. Cleaning records helps your equipment and vinyl collection last longer. So get the best, get the Groove Washer. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record shop, or go to groovewasher.com and use discount code VinylGuide10 at checkout. Accept no second-rate substitutes. Get the Groove Washer, groovewasher.com, promo code VinylGuide10. And finally, if you love this podcast, and I sincerely hope you do, check out our other episodes, including some other interviews we've had with John Tefteller. Episodes 43 and 44, John is talking all about his record collection. Episode 93 of the Vinyl Guide, where John tells the story of Paramount Records. And episode 195, more blues and record collecting tales. Always fascinating to hear from John. We've also had blues historian Gail Dean Wardlow on the show, episodes 74 and 75, talking about how he found the grave of Robert Johnson and heaps more. Plus, we've got 200 plus other episodes to listen to and enjoy. We're up on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on Sonnet. Listen to us, subscribe, and enjoy the Vinyl Guide wherever you get your podcasts. And with the upfronts done, let's all settle into our comfy chair, get ourselves a nice hot cup of coffee or cold drink of beer, whatever your beverage choice is, and enjoy this conversation with world-renowned record collector John Tefteller. This week on the Vinyl Guide, again, we are welcoming back record legend John Tefteller, and we're going to cover all sorts of different things. John, I think this is your 4th time back to the show, and these are some of the episodes that we get the most comments on because people love hearing the tales of old records and finding these pre-war blues and all the preservation activities that you do.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear it, and I'm glad to be back, and let's see what we can cover today that maybe we haven't covered in the past, or go back and cover something a little better than we did in the past. Whatever you want to do, I'm ready to go.
Well, that's fantastic. And I got to tell you, throughout the year, what I do is I actually keep a little notes on my phone, and I have a file called Tefteller. And throughout the year, whenever I get a question just out of random, I'm thinking about things, especially when it has to do with 78s or old blues, I always jot it down. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can kind of hit on today.
Okay.
The Blues Images Calendar 2021 is another triumph. I have my copy. Pneumonia Blues theme is very appropriate. Lots of songs about tragedy and strife. And I do want to cover that in depth today.
Sure.
But first off, I want to get your take on how COVID has affected the used record market around the world. To me as a buyer, it seems that prices are still going up. But you as a guy who sells a lot of secondhand records, what impact has the pandemic had on you and what you do?
Well, my business is up roughly 25% since March. And I think it's because a lot of people are home, either by choice or by order, and they're sitting in front of their computers or they're looking at printed lists and they're deciding on what they want to buy. Now, that's an interesting phenomenon. I hope it continues. It's a little scary because a lot of people have lost their jobs and don't have extra money to be buying records. And yet I think, at least with my business, the majority of my customers seem to be older and retired. And I guess they have excess funds available and they're not dependent on working for their next paycheck. So I hope it continues, but it is a scary time because being up 25% is great, but it could have just as easily gone the other way and be down 25% or more. It just didn't happen yet, and I hope it doesn't.
Yeah. The first thing I assumed was, the record business is going to get the breaks. Maybe this is the end of the bubble we've experienced in the last 10 years, but it doesn't seem to be, at least yet.
No, I think that the people who have retail stores, the few record stores that are left in the world, and there's still some, I think they're having a world of hurt because a lot of them are either not open or very limited in how many customers they can have through the doors and all of that. I don't know how they're going to survive, but people who do mail order, so far, everybody I've talked to in all fields of collectibles, by the way, not just records, but movie posters, comic books, baseball cards, any of the collectible records, collectible fields, the really top rare stuff has taken off like wildfire. And everybody says, hey, we don't know what to do because we don't see much great stuff anymore to buy. The great stuff that we had is all flying out the door, so we don't know what to do for the future. But anyway, it's interesting. It's across all collectibles markets from what I've been able to tell, not just records.
Now, is it just the tops of the markets? Is it just really the blue chip stuff, the Beatles, the Paramount records, kind of the big names that people want? Or is it all across?
Yes, it is the top stuff that's flying out the door. But when the top stuff flies out the door, there's always people that pick up some medium and small stuff along the way. So it's all moving. It's just the top of the market is driving everything else.
Okay. A rising tide lifts all boats.
I guess. I've heard that phrase referred to in other contexts, but okay, for this it'll work.
Have you seen an impact in terms of new items or ephemera popping up? Are more people searching their attics? Have you seen more records or pictures or stuff coming out?
No, not really. Not for what I look for. I thought that might be the case. I thought that there might be with people home that they're doing some clean out and they'll find stuff and they'll put it up for sale. We haven't really seen too much of that in what I look for. I can't speak for what other types of record collecting are out there and what it's doing to that, but I haven't noticed that at all. The way I get my records is a little different from the way a lot of people do. I don't buy a whole lot online. I really don't like to spend hours and hours and hours running through eBay only to find just a very few items that I might be interested in and then find out they're not in that great a shape to start with. And so every once in a while, a good thing will turn up anywhere, including eBay, but most likely it's a lot of time for not a lot of reward. So for me to stay in business and for me to buy things for my personal collection, I've found that the only way that makes sense, and even this is a little difficult in the pandemic world, is to get out there and go across the United States, town by town by town, looking for records, what we call in the wild, and also from referrals from people who call me, who know somebody that's selling some records or wants to sell their collection or found a bunch of records and wants to sell some things. I work that way, and I do much better being able to buy quantities of nice things buying in person across the country than I ever would sitting at home in front of a computer. Now, if I'm strictly a collector and I strictly only want to buy things for my own personal collection, it probably doesn't pay to go out on the road to do that, because you're going to get frustrated when you don't find the exact records you want. But if you're going out there with the idea that you're going to pick up things you want along with a whole lot of other stuff that you can buy and sell to other collectors or trade to other collectors, then if you do it just right and spend a lot of time and unfortunately a lot of money and expenses and all that, you can find some great stuff. It's still out there. It's still hidden away in closets and basements and attics and barns and flea markets. It's still out there, but you have to hunt a lot more carefully than you did 20 or 30 years ago.
So what goodies have popped up this year? What pleasant, unexpected surprises did you see in 2020?
Well, not a lot. Mainly, as I said just a few minutes ago, it's because it's due to lack of being able to get out there and go town to town, state to state, and hunt down things. Mm-hmm. There has been one of the missing Paramounts turn up. It's not a great one, but it did turn up at a yard sale in Tennessee about a month or so ago.
Which one?
Well, it's Washboard Walter and John Bird. Paramount 13100. One side of it is called Woofin' Blues, and I can't remember what the other side of it is. It's all right. The Woofin' Blues is just okay. The B side of it is a direct rip-off of I'm Talking About You by Memphis Minnie. So if you like that song, you'll like this. I think Memphis Minnie does it better, but it's a direct copy of that song. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad it was found. I'm glad it's going to be, I'll have it for the next year's calendar. We'll put it out as bonus tracks on the next year's calendar. There is at least one other copy of it out there, but it's locked away in an archive that I have no access to. So this is the first time that it'll ever be reissued anywhere, because nobody has access to that archive. And so it can't come out until another copy was found, and another copy was found, so now it can come out.
When you say archive, is that some sort of official archive, or is it someone's collection that's a bit tight-fisted?
No, it's an official archive. I'm not sure I want to shame them on your program, but it's an official archive, yes, and they just don't allow anyone in there, even copyright owners, to get access to what they have. They're very closed up and tight about it.
2020 did bring us a new image of Robert Johnson. What were your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's an incredible image. I actually knew that existed, and the not so secret is there's more where that came from, and there I don't know when the others are coming out, but there are more. So, yeah, I thought it was great. I thought actually that's the best picture of him that's surfaced publicly.
Yeah. It's from that same session, it looks like, the one with the cigarette.
Yes, and that should be a hint for you as to how you would know that there's more coming. What happened when you went into a dime store back in the 30s and had your picture taken in one of those booths, which is what that is, it's a dime store photo booth photo, you didn't just get one picture. You got a whole series of pictures, 5 or 6 different pictures. You could pose 5 or 6 times for a quarter or whatever it was. And then the pictures would come spitting out of the machine and you would take them home. So there's more.
All right. Well, looking forward to that.
Well, I don't have them, but I think they'll come out.
Have you seen them?
No, I haven't, but I know people that have.
So in these dime store photos, there's like a lot of 6 or 8, you said. So it sounds like
something like that. I mean, it depended on how much money you put in the machine, but it wasn't 1 or 2 photos. You got a series of them.
What I'm hearing is there's probably 3 to 5 out there.
That sounds about right. And then, of course, there's one that goes along with the studio portrait, the Hooks Brothers portrait. When they took the Hooks Brothers portrait in Memphis, the one where he's seated in the studio with the guitar all dressed up with the backdrop, they didn't just take one of those either. There is a definite second one that's in the collection of Mac McCormick, and Mac McCormick died within the last couple of years, and his collection is in the hands of his family. I don't know if they know where the photo is, but I'll bet they do, but they're not releasing it at this time.
And these people that are hanging on to these photos, any idea what they're holding on to them for?
I probably would rather not speculate on that. Usually it's wanting lots of money.
Right. Or
I'm not going to say that that's the case here, but that's the usual answer to that question.
Yeah. They want exorbitant amounts of money, or they're saving it for their own book.
Correct.
Got it. But they haven't specified what it is they're looking for.
No.
Okay.
Not to me, anyway. Maybe somebody knows something out there. I don't know. I'm not the end-all, be-all source of information on rare photographs, although I do have a lot of them, and I try to buy them whenever I can. But no, I'm not 100% plugged into that world. Much more plugged into the world of 78 RPM records.
Fair enough. I saw on the new Blues Images CD, the Meade Lux Lewis track Honky Tonk Train Blues was remastered from a store stock copy found last year.
Yeah.
And that astonished me. You're still finding old store stock 78s.
Yeah. In fact, that's what I look for, because when you get these records and they're all battered and worn from being played on those old wind-up machines, it takes a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of money to restore them to something that sounds good to modern ears. So I save myself as much time as possible by seeking out and buying the finest condition copies of these things that I can find. I think from a collectible standpoint, that makes sense. And from a reissue standpoint, it makes the most sense, because you can get much better sound out of one that hasn't been damaged by steel needles. And yes, they do turn up. There are families of people across the United States, sons, grandsons, great-grandsons, great-granddaughters, etc., of people that used to be in the record business, used to carry records in their stores, their barber shops, their TV repair shops, their furniture stores, and that records were sold in all kinds of unusual places, including record stores, but not limited to record stores. And the relatives and descendants of these people still have remnants from some of those stores. And when you can find them, or they find you, and they call and they say, hey, my grandfather had a record store in Mississippi in 1933, and he closed up in 1939 and put all this stuff in the basement, and it's still there. Those are the kind of calls I live for and dream about. And when those come, I'm on the first plane to Mississippi or wherever it is to check it out. The Honky Tonk Train Blues copy that you refer to actually turned up in New Jersey. I bought it in Pennsylvania from a guy that got it in New Jersey, but he had gotten it in New Jersey from a small batch of stuff that turned up just that way, from somebody whose relatives had owned a music store at one time and still had a small pile of records left over that were unsold stock. And sure enough, that was one of them.
So you get a couple of those phone calls a year, I'd imagine, yeah?
Well, I like to. I hope to. Usually it winds up, just so you get an idea, my phone rings here at least 2 to 3 times a day with somebody wanting to sell me a record collection or a single record of some sort. Now, a lot of it I turn down because it's just not what I need, or the condition isn't right, or they want too much money for what they have, a number of possibilities. But usually somewhere between once and twice a year, so you were pretty close in your guess. Once and twice a year, someone will call here with something really intriguing sounding about some old stock or some old warehouse find of something. And sometimes it turns out to be as incredible as it sounds. Usually it doesn't. Usually it's less incredible than it sounds, but I'm usually able to salvage something out of it. So yeah, about once or twice a year something like that happens. Now, it's happening less and less as time moves along because we're getting further and further away from the 1920s and 30s, and even from the 50s when the stores were having leftover stock then. We're getting further away, and so eventually there'll be no more calls like that. But for now, there's still a few, yes.
I was watching American Epic, and I was in part of their footage. I see boxes of records with like the Columbia logo on them being shipped out here and there. And I think there were Victor boxes as well. Do many of those old original shipping boxes survive?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, I have a lot of them because that's what I do, is I collect the records, the boxes, the advertising material, anything related to it. So I have some. Most of the ones you see now are not from the 20s and 30s. They're mostly from the 50s. So you'll see a King Federal box or an Atlantic box or something like that. But yeah, they're out there. It's not something you see frequently, but they're out there. A lot of them are the common labels too, the Decas and RCAs and Columbias, and I don't get too excited by those. But if I see something really neat, Paramount had a shipping label. They didn't have a specific box. They used a plain brown box, but they had a couple different or multiple different shipping labels. And on their labels, they had little pictures of Papa Charlie Jackson and Ma Rainey, and those are really cool when you see those.
Wow. I would imagine only a handful of those really survive to this day.
Yeah, I have a few, but you're correct. There's another thing that's really cool. Was put out by the OK Company, who did a lot of blues and all kinds of other stuff, part of Columbia, and it was called Your House for Blues. And it was an album where you could put 12 10-inch 78s in it, and it comes in this really cool-looking cover with cartoon drawings of African-American blues players kind of with a house. And I've only seen that once, and I have it. I'm sure there were other copies of it, but I've never seen another one. So they did some cool things.
Oh. So we all know about the white label promos for records from the 60s and 70s and even up to current day. Back in pre-war blues, were there any promo standards? Did they have acetates that they shipped out? I mean, what else is available other than the record that was pressed and put out there?
Okay. There were no acetates. First of all, and I don't want to be sounding too highfalutin here, but those are not really acetates. What you're referring to, the real term for it is lacquered discs. It's not an acetate. But acetate is the common phrase that everybody's adopted and everybody uses until they are told that it's wrong, and then sometimes they still use it anyway. But no, it's called a lacquered disc, not an acetate. But there were no lacquered discs in the 20s and 30s. That didn't exist. When they made records in the 20s and 30s, they were made on large hunks of actual wax. They were cut into wax discs. And then when they were done with them, they were melted and used again. And the wax was reconstituted and used them again. None of those survive, except I think one or two. I think there's one or two out there that have survived that are actual wax masters. Once the wax master was made, then it went to a raw aluminum mother, father, they call it mother, father, and all that to make the records. A small amount of those exist, but very small amount. Most of those were scrapped for the raw aluminum because they're literally raw aluminum or copper. And so it was real easy to, when they were no longer needed, to take them down to the scrapyard and get some money for them for the raw aluminum or the raw copper value of the metal. Then the next thing would be a test pressing, and a test pressing is just simply a regular 78. It looks like a 78. It's made out of the same material as a 78, but it has a plain white label or a special label on it in which the information as to what is on it is usually either handwritten or typed onto the label, not printed in quantity like you see on a regular label. So some test pressings exist for different things. There's some Paramount test pressings, there's some OK test pressings, Columbia's, Vocalions. There's a number of different test pressings out there because they made more than one of those. They made tests so that they could decide amongst the people in the company which takes to issue. So like with Charlie Patton or whatever, they would do 2 or 3 or 4 takes of each song and then press up a dozen or 2 test pressings of each of the takes and hand them out within the company and have people vote basically on which take to issue. And so some of those have survived over the years. As far as promotional copies, and this is something I really didn't know until fairly recently, yes, Paramount and some of the other companies did send out promotional copies in the late 20s and early 30s. I saw a promotional copy of Mean Black Cat Blues by Charlie Patton, very clearly marked for promotion use only. I saw that within the last couple of years. So yes, they did those, but very few of those survive.
Was it just written on the label?
No, it's actually printed.
Oh, okay.
Printed right on it. Promotional copy.
So they actually had the printer make more, probably,
Oh, yeah, no, they made some. They definitely did, except, man, who knows where those went, because I've only seen one. One Paramount of Charlie Patton, anyway, but I'm sure there's others.
So you suspect other labels probably did something similar.
Yes. And I've seen others from the early 30s that are stamped preview copy or demonstration copy or something like that. Yeah, so they did them, but mostly at that point they were just giving out regular pressings as promotional items.
Whenever the artist recorded their song, you said they recorded it, the music was cut into essentially a wax disc, yeah?
Yes.
How did the engineer who was recording it preserve that wax disc from where it was? Let's say they recorded it in Houston. The pressing company was, I'm assuming, outside of Houston. How was it then managed or cared for? So the wax,
they had to actually truck them from the studio to wherever the pressing plant was, using ice to keep them from melting.
Okay.
Because they were little hunks of wax. And if it was hot, it was summer, and cars didn't come with air conditioning back then. There's no such thing. You rolled down the window. So they would put them on ice and transport them.
Wow. Okay. So they'd have a refrigerated truck. They'd have to arrange that to
right
after each recording session.
Correct.
To go far out. Okay. And if the artist had a mistake and they were to start again, and I know they tolerated very few of those, but from what I understand, the engineer was able to flatten out the wax or scrape off one take to allow another to occur. Is that right?
Well, maybe. I'm not 100% sure of that. I think they just used another blank. Mm-hmm. I think if there was a problem, they just pull it off and put a fresh one on. But they could recycle the wax. Yes, they could do that, but I don't think they did it there in the studio. I think they sent those out, and then they would come back and they'd trade them in for new blanks.
So let's talk about the 2021 calendar, because again, you keep hitting these out of the park, John. And every year when I hold the new calendar, it's just like, I feel so happy that someone is doing this sort of work out there to preserve the blues and put good music and facts out there as well. It's not just the music, but also the imagery and the ephemera that goes along with it. In this latest 2021 calendar, the CD, you include some tracks, Lost John Hunter Blues Sessions from Sun Records. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Lost John Hunter was a blind piano player in Memphis who started out playing in the church in Memphis. He made 2 records in 1950 that were released by the Four Star Company of Pasadena, California. Four Star was primarily a country and western label, but they had a blues series, and they released 2 records by Lost John Hunter. They are considered fairly scarce records to find and pretty much in demand because he's really good. He has a really good Charlie Patton type gravelly voice, and he pounds away at the piano, and they're really interesting records. Now, I've had the records for decades. I never knew that they were recorded at Sun Records in Memphis. I guess if I would have researched it, I could have found that out, but I didn't know that. But anyway, about 2 years ago, I bought the entire collection from Bill McCall's estate. Bill McCall was the owner of Four Star Records, and I bought everything that was left in the building where he used to operate from, and that included about 100,000 master tapes, lacquered discs, and pressings of records. And I've gone through all the tapes and found some incredible things that will be issued on upcoming calendar CDs. But as I was just moving one of the boxes of lacquered discs around, I just opened it to see what it was and what was in it. And when I opened the box, the very top lacquered disc was a 16-inch lacquered disc, and it said Memphis Recording Service on it, which I knew was Sam Phillips at Sun, and it said Lost John Hunter. And I thought, oh, man, okay, this will be fun. And what it turned out to be was the very first session for Lost John Hunter, not the session that produced the two records that everybody that's into this knows and loves, but a session months before that where nothing was issued. Done at Sun with Sam Phillips at the controls, and it actually turns out, in doing my research, it was the first session at Sun for an African-American blues artist. So when Sam Phillips opened the door to his studio in 1950, the very first black recording artist that he did was Lost John Hunter in this session, and the session discs survive. Now, nobody knew they did. I didn't know they did until I opened this box, and there they were. And I put them on the turntable, and I went, oh, boy, are these good, and these have to be released. And so that's exactly what we did. We cleaned them up because they were falling apart. They were old and crumbly and whatever, but we got them restored to where you can't tell. They sound beautiful. And we put all 11 tracks on the new CD, and people are going wild about it, especially the Sun collectors, because here's something from Sun that they never knew existed, and it's something they can now enjoy all this time later.
Now, when you find a record like that, you open this box, you see this record there, you have a holy moly moment. Is there a hesitation about actually playing it at that point?
No. I have no hesitation about playing anything because I have all the right equipment here to do it. So the discs, there were two of them for this session, two separate discs, right, one right next to each other in the box, and they were damaged. I don't know how much in the weeds you want me to get about what kind of damage there was, but I'll start, and you can decide if you want to use this or take it out. But when you have what you were calling acetates earlier, and the proper term is lacquered discs, when you have lacquered discs that have been stored improperly for a long period of time, what happens is, and by stored improperly, I mean in a non-consistent temperature. If you take acetates or lacquer discs and you store them at a cool, constant temperature of about 68 degrees, they don't deteriorate. Unless they get damaged or too much moisture or something happens to them, they don't deteriorate. But if you store them in a building with no air conditioning and it's hot during the summer and then cold during the winter and then hot during the summer and cold during the winter, that temperature fluctuation causes the lacquer on the aluminum-based disc to start to mold. And as it starts to mold, it leaches what's called palmatic acid, which is an ingredient in the lacquer coating. It starts leaching palmatic acid up from the grooves onto the surface of the record, and it produces what looks like a white moldy powder. And in order to play the record, once that happens, you have to get that record and scrub it in hot scalding water with very soft detergent. Don't use anything with a harsh chemical, but very soft detergent, and scrub that very carefully with a soft sponge and get all that palmatic acid off of there, because if you don't take it off, you can't play it. The needle won't track the grooves. So we had to do that. We had to clean these things off, and it takes several cleanings to get it all out. And the big worry you have is once that deterioration process starts, it's a matter of the lacquer itself detaching from the metal disc. And so as it detaches, the lacquer falls off the disc with the grooves on it. And when the lacquer falls off the disc with the grooves on it, it becomes unplayable because you're losing the sound. It's just crumbling to the floor. So sometimes I'll find these lacquered discs and I'll pull them out of the envelope and it's like confetti. Yeah. It's just like all these pieces of lacquer comes flying out of the envelope and it's gone. The record's gone. You can't put it back together at that point. It's all fragmented. So I was hoping that when I pulled these out, I saw all that powder all over them, and I thought, oh man, if I go to clean these, are they going to crumble as I clean them, or are they going to remain intact? And fortunately, they remained intact, and I was able to get transfers from them, and they sound beautiful now. And now it's a matter of keeping those discs in a constant humidity and temperature-controlled environment so they don't deteriorate any further and start falling apart.
When you play them on your record player, do you use specific needles, wood or bamboo, or standard?
Oh, no. Wooden and bamboo needles, things like that. That's a different thing. Those were created in the 30s for raw aluminum, to play raw aluminum. This is a lacquer-coated disc, or what you would call an acetate-coated disc. It's a black coating on top of an aluminum blank. The discs that are raw aluminum, they made bamboo needles to play those, because if you play a raw aluminum disc with a diamond needle, it damages the disc, because the diamond is harder than the raw aluminum. So it damages it when you play it. So you don't want to play a raw aluminum disc with a diamond needle. You want to play it with something softer. But with a lacquer disc, you can play them with a regular diamond needle.
Now, back in the day, they'd have several different types of needles.
Yes.
The metal, the bamboo. What were the differences between those? Like, where would you use one, not the other?
The difference is the size of the needle itself, the tip. It comes in what's called mils. There's 2 mil, 2.5, 2.7, 2.8, 3.0, 3.5, 4.0. There's like, you can get like an array of them in different sizes. And it's a matter of how big that diamond tip is. And when you're playing back a 78, and we're really going in the weeds here, but if that's what you want to do, I'm cool with it. When you play back a 78, you can actually sit there and experiment with different size mill needles until you hit the right one that matches the grooves, because nothing was uniform back then. Every company used a different size groove. And so if you play with the needles and change out the needles, when you get the one that fits the grooves perfectly, you know it immediately, because the sound changes. The noise level goes down to almost zero unless it's a damaged disc, and the sound just leaps out of those grooves when you match the needle with the proper needle with the proper groove. So yes, we do that when we do our restorations. We make sure we match the proper needle with the proper groove and then restore from there.
Can you look at a record, you pick up, I mean, obviously, you're very experienced in this, but can you look at a record and say, you know what, I bet you that'll sound great with a 2.4?
Well, only because I've done it for so long, yes. But no, most people can't do that. You have to actually put it on and try it. Here's another, I mean, really, again, going in the weeds here, but if you have a groove that's damaged from years of abuse, sometimes you can use a different needle than what you normally would use, and you can put a different needle in there that will ride in a different part of the groove. And so you do that to be able to get past the damage and find the wall of the groove or the bottom of the groove, the left side, the right side, whatever side within that groove you can find that has the least amount of damage, and pull the sound out of it that way.
Okay. So when you're doing these record restorations, quite often you have to kind of search for the right needle for the transfer
Correct.
Of that particular record.
Correct.
And back in the day, I know that there's a lot of different tins, 78 needle tins from various manufacturers.
We don't use any of those original needles. Those original needles are all like nails. They do nothing but damage the records. No, we use modern diamond needles, not those little nail things.
Yeah. But I mean, back in the day, would people
they
do
had
the same
tins.
thing?
Yes, the tins came. Yes, correct.
Do you also collect 78 needle tins?
Only if they're interesting to me. And by interesting to me, I'll tell you that there is one with Ma Rainey's picture on it. Yeah. There's one with Bessie Smith, and there's one with Eva Taylor. There's 4 or 5 of them that are really cool because they have little pictures on them of the blues artists. And yes, I have those.
Would a company like Paramount or
Never seen a Paramount one.
Okay.
There probably is one out there, but I've never seen one.
In terms of the tins, is there still a big market for those? Are there still a lot of collectors, or is it kind of corner cases?
I don't know if there's any market for them. I mean, I think like one with Ma Rainey's picture on it or Bessie Smith, I paid $1,000 for those. But as far as just in general, I don't think there's much market. There's some with Bing Crosby on them and the Andrews sisters and different people pictured on them. And I see those sell occasionally on the internet for a little bit of money, but not much. The blues ones are the ones that when they show up, they go for the bucks.
Okay. A couple other questions, and probably going slightly off of the pre-war blues topic here.
Sure.
There are a couple of highly collectible records, and I suspect you have a story, perhaps an opinion on them. The 5 Sharps, Stormy Weather. That particular 78 seems to have a lure all to itself. Have you ever had a copy of that, or do you have an opinion on that record?
Yeah, I've never had one. I can give you an opinion, and you can take it for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
That record was a legendary record. It was in huge demand back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and I guess I'll say into the 90s. And then it all collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that, first of all, it's not a very good record. It's okay. It's a standard R&B vocal group record from that early 50s time period, but not a particularly good one. It's just legendary rare. But the market for that type of music kind of started going down around the late 90s and has not really recovered. Blues has always been good. Some of the other forms that I've mentioned earlier have always been good and collectible. The market for R&B doo-wop 78s has kind of tanked over the last 20 years. And so I don't think if one of those came up for sale now that it would do very well compared to what it would have done. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I had a standing offer from one of my customers that was willing to pay $30,000 for a nice copy of that record on 78. It was his most wanted record because he had everything else in terms of R&B vocal group records. Mm-hmm. He had every other R&B vocal record you could imagine, but he didn't have that one. So that was his holy grail, and he was willing to pay $30,000 for it. Another collector about 8 years ago bought one on the internet for just under $20,000. And then about 3 years ago, there was one for sale at an auction house in New York with a $6,000 opening bid, and they didn't get one single bid. It just died. So, I mean, I think probably the accurate price for it right now is somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000, but to find a buyer for it might be much rarer than finding the record itself.
Now, it sounds like you've been dealing with a lot of record collectors for decades and decades. When they
45 years, yes.
When they pass, do their families reach back out to you to help liquidate their collections?
Sometimes. Mm-hmm. I hope that they would, because I do pay well for what I buy if I want what I'm buying. Mm-hmm. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they. And this is the horror story. They just throw it all away. Or they sell it very cheaply to somebody local, figuring nobody's going to fly in here from wherever to buy this collection. We just want to get rid of it, and they dump it locally. So sometimes I get the calls, sometimes I don't.
And tell me the story of this Beatles Sgt. Pepper cover with the Capitol executives on it.
Ah, okay. So you saw I had that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's way far off from Paramount Records and the blues and all of that, but that's okay. We've talked a lot about that in the past, so maybe we should spend a little time on this.
I told you I have a list of Tefteller points that I want to bring up throughout the year.
Okay.
This is one of these oddball ones.
All right. Well, I mean, I have always liked the Beatles. Even when I was young, I liked the Beatles. I always thought that they were really great. I like blues. I like all kinds of music, so I'm not just limited to blues. Mm-hmm. I can find good in most any type of music. I don't really collect anything personally other than blues, but I do like all bunch of different forms of music. In any case, I was called to an estate sale in the San Francisco Bay Area about 10 or 12 years ago, somewhere in that range. And it was from somebody whose relative had worked as a salesman for Capitol Records. So I thought that sounded interesting enough that I would go to this house and look at this collection of records that were being sold off. And most of it was your standard Capitol Records out of the 50s and 60s. It was a lot of Frank Sinatra and a lot of just stuff with a little bit of rock and roll here and there mixed in. And I'm going through and I'm pulling out things that I want to buy. And when I was all finished, I had a few boxes out of thousands of records, just a few boxes that I had pulled out that I wanted to buy. And the lady that was having the sale said to me, "Did you take the Sgt. Pepper LP?" And I said, "No, I don't really need a Sgt. Pepper LP." She goes, "Well, you might need this one. It's a special one." And I said, "What do you mean special one?" She goes, "Well, my husband's picture is on the front cover." And I said, "What are you talking about?" So she goes to one of the boxes that I had been through, flipping through, looking at these records, and she pulls out this album and she hands it to me and she says, "Here, this one." And I looked at it and I realized, wait a minute. Yeah, I went by this too fast. I thought it was just another Sgt. Pepper LP. I didn't think it was anything special. And sure enough, what it was in December of 1967, Sgt. Pepper came out in June of 1967. But in December of 1967, Capitol Records had a party for Christmas. And they were celebrating the fact that Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band had become the biggest selling LP for the Beatles. And so as part of this little celebration party where they invited all the salesmen from across the country to come to Hollywood to attend, they made a special cover for Sgt. Pepper, taking the Beatles off the cover. They removed the Beatles from the cover, and they left some of the other celebrities on there, but not all of them, and they replaced those celebrity heads and the Beatles' heads with various Capitol executives and salesmen. And they printed these up with a Sgt. Pepper stereo LP in it and with this new special cover. They printed, from what we've been able to determine, about 100 of them for this party, and they handed them out to everybody as party favors as they went to the party at Capitol. And I had no idea. I didn't know this thing existed, but this lady had this, and she handed it to me and said, "Here, take this. This was my husband's on this. His picture's on this cover. Just take this." And I went, "Okay." And I took it home and I started researching it. And I said, "Oh my God, this is something incredible. I had never heard of it. It wasn't really documented anywhere." I called some people that I knew in Los Angeles that did a lot of dealing with the Beatles. And he said, yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, we had a couple of them in the last 30 years that were beat to hell, but what shape is yours in? Well, this one was sealed. It's never been opened. It was brand new. The man that had it never opened it. He just shoved it in a box. And so there it was. And I got some interesting publicity about it because I started telling people I had it, and the record collector, I think, in England valued it immediately at $100 and some thousand pounds or something. I don't know, whatever it was, some crazy amount of money. And I just put it away as an investment, figuring, hey, I'll just keep it, and maybe someday my kids will sell this, or I'll decide to sell it, or whatever. And I actually did put it out for sale earlier this year. Came sort of close to finding a buyer, but never really connected with just the right person who would appreciate it enough to spend a whole bunch of money on it. and it's actually for sale now. It's on my website or eBay or somewhere. I know it's out there somewhere with my name on it. So it is for sale, but it's not something I want to sell cheaply. I think it's the ultimate rare beetle piece of all time, and anybody who wants one, there's a few of them out there. I think there's 4 or 5 known copies, but I've got the only one that's never been opened and still sealed mint. So someday someone will buy it. When just the right buyer comes along, it'll sell.
So you've been able to deduce about 100 of those were made at one point.
Correct.
And in terms of the people that are on the cover, anyone we would know, or these are all just Capitol executives?
They're all Capitol executives.
Okay.
I don't think there's anyone that you would know. I think Alan Livingston is on there. He was president of Capitol Records. Just whoever was in executive positions and sales positions at Capitol in 1967 would be on that cover.
Do you have any of the Livingston butchers in your collection?
No. When Alan Livingston Jr. came to Beetlefest in Los Angeles in the early 80s with the box containing those, what are now called Livingston butchers, he brought them to my table and asked if I wanted to buy any of them. And I can't remember what he was asking for them. I think he was taking offers or something. But anyway, immediately I had a table at the Beetlefest selling Beatle stuff there, and immediately a bunch of the people who are much more into Beatles and collecting Beatles and dealing in Beatles than I ever was, they surrounded Alan Livingston Jr. and he didn't leave that show till all those copies were sold for a lot of money back then. Now they've sold for a whole lot more since, but no, I did not buy one. I had a sealed original mono that had come from a different Capitol Records employee. I had one of those that I bought at a store in Glendale way back, and I had that for years. I finally sold it. But no, I never had any of the Livingston butchers, although I looked at them. I saw them when he opened up the box, and there they were.
So not only did you not get one of the Livingston butcher covers, but it sounds like he also pulled a lot of the customers away from your table just by the attention.
Actually, he brought the customers to my table because it was there where all this was going on. He opened the box and said, "Do you want to buy these?" And I'm holding them up and looking at them. All of a sudden, people are looking, and other dealers come walking over. So no, it created a big stir at the Beetlefest that day.
Well, John, look, I could talk records to you all day, but I got to tell you this. I'm going to save some questions for next year. Hopefully, you'll be able to come on when we're talking about
I'm happy to come on, assuming we got a calendar going, and even if we don't, I'll come on anyway. But yeah, no, that's fine. We can do it next year. But yeah, I'll answer whatever you want, whenever you want. And we don't have to stick with Paramount Records. As you can tell, I can talk to you about Beatles, collectibles, and anything else in the record world you want to talk about.
Absolutely. No, and what I do want to do is make sure that everyone knows about this Blues Images calendar, because it really is one of the delightful things about each year is being able to get one of these calendars. I'm just flipping through it now, and of course, as any wall calendar will have, every month has a large image. You know, in this case, it's a pre-war blues artist. But throughout the days of the month, there's different birthdays and commemorative dates in the history of blues. Plus, there's small ads, ones that would have appeared in papers in the 20s and 30s selling some of these records, and the stories of some of these blues people. I mean, most of them are pretty heart-wrenching. You know, a few of them in the 2021 calendar were up for murder. Most of them died young, but you know, you put it together in a very tasteful way, telling some rough stories. And you know, every year when I get one of these Blues Images calendars, I always spend an afternoon just flipping through each month and reading it, you know, intently like I would a book, because it really is, it's more than a calendar. It is really a work of art, and it's like reading a music history book. And the CD is this whole other level of interaction as well. So I'm so glad that every year you've continued to put these out. It really is a labor of love. I know, you know, no one's making millions of dollars on these things, so just putting them out for people's enjoyment is a great thing to do for music lovers. So again, everyone go to bluesimages.com, pick up one of the 2021 calendars. There's also older calendars as well, even though you may not need to hang those on your wall. They also have the same amount of facts, music imagery, and of course the CDs also come with them as well. And those could be had at bluesimages.com. I'll put all the links in this episode page. And again, John, thank you so much for coming on the Vinyl Guide.
Yeah, we have about 18 CDs that come in previous calendars that are available simply as CDs. So if you don't want to have the older calendars, although they do look great if you take the pictures out of them and frame them and hang them on the wall, if you just want the wonderfully restored CDs, you can get those separately. And we also have blues T-shirts, blues posters. So there's other things to look at. But bluesimages.com is where you go to find it. Thank you so much for your support and having me on the show and the nice things you have to say about what I do. It's really appreciated because we do work really, really hard to make these the best we can make them. We spare no expense, and unfortunately, it really gets expensive. So all the help I can get to market a few out there is great, and thank you for your kind words and for having me.
Anytime, John. Well, there we go. Words of a master, Mr. John Tefteller of bluesimages.com. Go up there now, bluesimages.com, pick up the 2021 calendar. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. There's also international distributors up on the site. So head up there now. If you're in the UK, if you're in Japan, you can pick them up from local dealers. If you're in Australia, the Vintage Record in Sydney has them in stock. Go over there now. The Blues Images calendar of 2021. If you want to hear more of this interview, there's about another 20-30 minutes of this interview, a lot more details and a lot more stories. Head up to patreon.com/vinyl guide. We have an extended interview up there, lots more fascinating tales from John Tefteller. And that is it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thanks again for tuning in. Please share these episodes on your social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Get them in circulation with your friends, your other record nerd buddies. Put them on Facebook groups you think would be interested, and even leave us a nice review. Those are huge ways that you can help support and further this show. And we'll be back with a brand new episode shortly. So until we talk next time, keep spinning. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.